we can. I know darn well we can work it out. Oh, yes, we can. I know we can. Yes, we can. Oh, why can't we if we want to? Yes, we can. I know we can make it work. I know we can make it if we try. Oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Gosh, you're right.
Welcome to Yes We Can podcast with Pastor Sherman D.Manning. Listen, today I have a special guest. Police authorities labeled him as an incorrigible juvenile delinquent and a hardcore recidivist. In 1974, he was a 10th grade dropout and a gang member. He had several juvenile court convictions under his belt, charges ranging from assault to attempted murder. This was a dangerous young man. He has gone from a gang member to an attorney. He went to LA high schools before he dropped out. He went to Southern Colorado State College under a special program for juvenile delinquents where he obtained his GED. From there, this man went on to Cal State University, Northridge. He then went to Laverne School of Law. He is a highly successful civil rights attorney, and he also takes on personal injury cases. His name is none other than attorney Humberto Guizar. He's a personal friend of mine, means a lot to me, and I'm just happy to be bringing attorney Humberto Guizar on this podcast today. Get ready for this fascinating, amazing, spectacular interview. If I sound like I'm excited, I am. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to sponsor this podcast, send an email directly to me. My email address should be on the screen, shermandmanning@gmail.com. If you'd like to be one of our named sponsors, if you'd like to contribute to helping us feed the hungry, house the homeless, do me a favor, don't just watch the podcast. Go to yeswecanworshipcenter.org. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, click donate now, and send your donation today. I have many multimillionaires who watch this podcast. If one of you would just be moved and touched by God to send $1 million tax deductible donation to yeswecanworshipcenter.org, it would make a major difference in helping us to house the homeless and feed the hungry. But in the meantime and in between time, don't allow the fact that maybe you don't have $1 million to keep you from giving anything. Anything you donate, $25, $2,500, $5,000 will help us feed the hungry, house the homeless, and keep this fabulous podcast coming into your home. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to this podcast with attorney Humberto Guizar. Take a look at this. Thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Attorney Humberto Guizar, welcome to the show.
Quit cracking.
Listen, tell me this. How did you go from a juvenile delinquent, from a gangbanger, to an attorney? How did this happen? Tell me.
Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that I had a praying mother.
Thank you, Jesus.
And I think because of the grace of God, through a miracle, because I shouldn't be a lawyer, to be honest with you. You know, I don't know if you really know the details, but I had 9 felonies by the time I was 16 years old.
Right.
And I wasn't a wannabe gang member. I was literally a shot caller in the gang. I made a lot of decisions that hurt people.
Right.
I'm not proud of that part of my life, but it's a fact. It is what it is.
Right.
That's what I came from.
And I normally start my show off by saying, tell me who you are, but because of your background, I have to say, tell me who you were. So who were you when you were gangbanging and doing those things? And we'll talk about how you got to the change, but who were you at 15?
Like I told the state bar people when they called me back, they called me up when I passed the bar.
Mm-hmm.
The person that was examining me, questioning me, for one, they never let you know if you passed the bar. You know, they don't let people know. But a few days before the bar results came out, somebody called me. And the crazy thing was that I know how to identify people because of where I grew up. I mean, clearly the lady that was talking to me was a person speaking Ebonics, you know, like from an LA woman that spoke like a person of color.
From the
she
hood.
Was talking to me saying,
from the
hood. She was like, your name Humberto Guizar? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, I can't believe. She started off the conversation like that.
Mm-hmm.
I go, it says right here, you got 9 felonies. 9 felonies, attempted murder by Lord. I go, she goes, attempted murder 3 times, assault with deadly weapon, grand theft auto. I can't believe, is that you? You're the Humberto Guizar guy? and,
So
and
let's go
straight,
back there to those nine.
I told her,
Let's go back there to those nine felonies. Tell me,
yeah.
how did you start gangbanging? Was it because of where you grew up? Was it because of your neighborhood? And then we're going to get back to what you told her.
Well, that's a different story. But what I told her was the truth. I did come from a very good foundation. I went to elementary school with good parents. My parents were always good people, but
Mm-hmm.
I got in gangs. I got thrown into gangs
How?
because of the
How?
environment.
How did you get? Okay.
Basically, uh, I was getting bullied all the time and slapped, spit on, and to get accepted, it was the only way to get accepted and not be bullied was to get into a gang. And then once you get into a gang, this is the part I didn't tell her, but once you get into a gang, the recognition and the respect you start to get encourages you to want to be more involved in the gang. And the more notoriety you get, the more famous you become. It's like social media nowadays. With people to get famous, they want to keep doing it
Right.
because like the more social media I do, where people recognize me, the more I want to do.
Right.
So basically, that's the way it is in a gang. The more crimes you commit, the more recognition you get. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get stuck in this, and now you're caught up in a really bad situation, and it just elevates.
And you
But what I told that person
and
was,
so you start getting those notches on your belt, and you have
yeah.
to keep going, right?
So I told that woman, I said, to me, it was like living in a dream.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's like another world. I said, because I turned my life around. I had already graduated from college. I graduated top 10 in my law school class.
Mm-hmm.
I had flipped my whole life around.
Right.
I got addicted to learning, like literally like drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I felt the empowerment of education. I felt the empowerment of knowledge. I mean, where I couldn't walk into a store and ask for a simple condom. I'd walk in and go, hey, you got those things, I don't know how to say it. I
Right.
couldn't say it.
Right.
I couldn't communicate basic facts.
Right.
So being empowered with education and fortunately for me, I was always a very smart kid. I was in gifted classes as a little kid. So I wasn't a dumb person. And I know that a lot of people that are involved in gangs
Mm-hmm.
never got the chance that I did.
Right.
I was looking at going to prison for 5 years
Mm-hmm.
for the last case I had.
Right.
And instead of going to prison, they tested me.
Mm-hmm.
They did what you probably know as a pre-screening evaluation.
Right.
And I scored really high on the aptitude test,
Right.
much higher than the average students in private school.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Did you ever have private school?" And I'm like, "No." Then how did you score so high? How did you do that? I go, "Well, I was, in elementary school, I was one of the smartest kids in my class, and they jumped me up a grade, and I used to cheat and lie and say I was dumber than I was because I didn't want to get put in real smart classes, so I want to hang out with the homies.
Right.
So I didn't act like smart,
Right.
but I always had. I think that I was blessed with that skill,
Mm-hmm.
the intellect level,
Right.
and unfortunately, there's a lot of kids in the inner city that they get caught into it. They do methamphetamine, PCP, and it retards their growth, and they never come out of it.
Wow.
I did all those drugs too. I'm surprised somehow or another I did barbiturates, methamphetamine, not methamphetamine, PCP,
Right.
marijuana, all the drugs you can think of.
PCP. So wait a minute. So you smoke Sherm? They call
Yeah,
my
sure.
personal.
Oh, yeah.
Most
I
people call
smoked a
me
lot of
pastor,
Sherm.
but some of my friends call me Sherm. Sherm. So you
No,
smoke
Sherm's an
Sherm?
angel dust, they would call it.
Okay. Okay.
And I got blazed on that stuff.
Wow.
But before that, I started at the age of 12.
Mm-hmm.
I sniffed paint. I sniffed paint.
Wow.
I sniffed tester's glue. I
So
ingested
it's
a
a
lot of
wonder.
shit.
So it's a wonder
And
that
somehow or another, I didn't destroy my intellect. But
That's what I was gonna say. It's a wonder you're not mucho loco, man. It's a wonder you ain't crazy.
well, I am. There's still a crazy part of me, but I kind of keep it on the lockdown.
Right.
I just was blessed by God to be given the opportunity to go to a university. And when I was in a university, it was just amazing how empowered I felt.
How was Colorado for you? Was that culture shock?
Oh my God, it was so beautiful.
But let's back up because some people are gonna want to know about this probation officer who did
Yeah.
you a favor. Tell me about that story.
Well, that person called me in and said, "Hey, look, you scored really high on the aptitude test, and instead of going to prison, we'd like to give you an opportunity to go to a juvenile delinquent program for hardcore recidivists. These are some of the toughest kids in the nation that are determined to be smart, and we want to see if it makes a difference if you go to this program."
Okay.
And they said, a large percentage of these kids go on to college. You want to try it instead of going to prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what?
Right.
What? Are you kidding me?
Right.
I always liked studying, and now instead of going, and I was bad. I knew that if I went to jail, I deserved it.
Right.
I shot and stabbed people.
Right.
I was not faking it. I was not just a person they misidentified.
Mm-hmm.
I actually committed those crimes,
Right.
and I didn't think that they would give me the chance. And I was like, hell yeah, I went.
Mm-hmm.
And I was only 17. In 3 months, I got my GED, and they enrolled me in college.
Wow.
So all the time I had wasted in high school being a gang member kind of didn't really matter because now I had a GED and I was enrolled in college.
Wow.
And I knew that was a great opportunity, and I wasn't going to squander that.
Right.
However, like all of us, to continue to sin when God helps us,
right.
I'm not going to lie, even I continued to around or screw around, and I still would get together with my homeboys. And while I was in college, I got shot in the streets, and I almost got killed in Van Nuys because I reverted backwards.
Right.
After that shooting, I said, "What the hell was wrong with me?" And that's when I really decided I didn't want to go back there, visit my friends no more. So I don't get me wrong, I still see my best friends I grew up with, and I don't view myself as above them or anything like that.
Right.
But I decided that I wasn't gonna go hang out with them when they have guns or doing the drugs and stuff. And I never went back to that life again. Right. That was the end of it. I never went back to the gang life.
Right. Right. Wow. And so
and a lot of homies would question me and say, "Hey, man, you're not putting in work for the neighborhood no more, man. Somebody got killed, blah blah blah." And I said, "Hey, look, I've been shot twice.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in jail multiple times, and I went to jail. No one went to visit me. One time a whole year in jail, nobody went to visit me.
Right.
And I put in my time. A lot of brutal fights I represented, and I did my time with the neighborhood. I wasn't going to do anything anymore. At first, I got a lot of throwback.
Right.
But now all my homies that I grew up with, they all respect me, and they're very proud that somebody from the hood became a lawyer, and not only a lawyer, but a civil rights lawyer for that.
Yeah,
because I fight for the civil rights of people.
You do civil rights, you do personal injury, and you've also done criminal law, haven't you?
I know. I did criminal law at the beginning. I did pretty good at it, but I don't like it.
Okay.
Because I could not handle people going to jail on my dime. I just cannot handle it.
Right.
Seeing someone go to prison after I did a trial and I couldn't win.
Right.
That really broke my heart. I just could not handle that.
Wow.
Because I know what it's like to be in jail.
Right.
The time flows by. It's so painful to be in jail.
Right.
There's nothing worse. Right. And I don't think people like these DAs, the people that sentence people,
yes,
they don't understand how horrible it is to be in jail for even a week.
Thank
you know what I mean? When
and
you're sitting there, you're looking at the clock.
Yes.
At 1 o'clock, and you're looking to the next hour, 2 o'clock.
Right.
It seems like a whole day goes by, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting.
Right.
The clock turns ever so slowly.
Right.
It's just your blood drips from your body to your brain, and you're just like, "Am I ever gonna get out?" And it's so painful.
See there, and stay with me and stay there for a moment, because believe it or not, I have judges that watch this podcast. I have some of the top lawyers in this country and prosecutors who watch this podcast. Yes, We Can podcast with Pastor Sherman D.Manning. I have amazingly powerful folks who watch this podcast, and some of them are so mad with George Gascon because they believe in this lock them up and throw away the key policy. And I keep saying we tried that for decades and it still didn't work. The streets still ain't no safer than they were, and we still have crime. So I think he's right for trying something different. So I just want you to stay there for a moment. You're talking about jail is hell. Jail is painful. Reiterate that point.
I've been in jail. I've had nightmares of going back to jail.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's some DAs and some cops that I've sued that would love to catch me doing something bad.
Yes.
But I don't do anything wrong. It's going to end up catching me in jail. Yes. I pay my taxes. I do everything I'm supposed to do because I know I'm the kind of person they'd want to come after.
Yes.
And jail's the worst place for somebody to go, especially when you're older. If you're older.
Yes.
But even when you're not, when I was young, jail is just a living hell.
Yes.
And I think there needs to be some kind of change so the people that commit crimes don't necessarily have to be in a locked up cell like an animal. Because you put somebody in a place that become like an animal.
Right.
They'll become an animal.
They'll become an animal. Yeah. They'll become an animal.
I was so violent. People looked at me wrong, twisted, and I was up on them breaking teeth.
Right.
Cracking their skulls against the walls.
Right.
And acting like a wild man. There's some crazy stuff in jail. When I went to jail, I ended up becoming the leader. Like I started from the beginning. I ended up becoming the main shot caller in the whole jail.
Right.
From being a little wumpy guy, I ended up becoming the biggest because I was so brutal in the attacks that I did. But I was the only way to survive. You only get only way I got respect in jail was to go after. If the big guy bullied me, I would just go at him like I was gonna kill him. And what
Yes.
happens? You turn into like an animal. And
Yes.
I remember the very last time I
Mhm.
got arrested, I was already in college, and I got arrested for some warrant of some kind ticket. Wasn't a big deal, but
Right.
there I was in the LA County glass house,
Hmm.
and in a matter of minutes, my chest was pumping up,
Right.
and my whole demeanor was changing,
Right.
and I was like, some dude asked me for cigarettes. I go, yeah, and I was like ready to just jump
Right.
like an animal. I was taken back to that environment,
Right.
and there's anyone that's been in jail knows the only way to survive in that environment is to be the animal that they're placing you in.
That's
So
right.
I think that there needs to be a change. I've seen friends of mine that went to prison, they got out after 30 years,
Hmm.
and they look so worn and beat
Come
and
on.
torn. Their whole body, their whole spirit is just completely messed up and destroyed. For whatever crime they did, they didn't deserve to come out like that. They
Yeah.
could have come out, they could have become a productive person in society or something.
Right.
You have to destroy people's spirit and their person,
Right.
crying out loud. They
You
should have some kind of like maybe make them work in construction somewhere and under supervision and
right.
in an open space,
Right.
like some kind of camps,
Right.
but not prisons. Prisons are horrible.
And
You know,
prisons don't
I mean,
work.
for the
And
real bad people,
right.
there are some we know
And
that
they
are,
certainly don't work. And I got to say this:
and
you're taking my job. You're preaching the gospel, man. I got to bring you to my church one Friday. But let me say this to you, as you know, and I don't hide it. I was in prison, wrongly convicted, and I'm a witness to what you just said a moment ago, and that is they'll come after you, and especially if they think that they can profile you and say that this is what you're into, be it drugs, be it murder, be it whatever it is. Once they profile you, they'll come after you, and they will put a charge on you, and you have to spend the rest of your life fighting and all of your money fighting if you got any money. But when I was in prison, I wrote a book called Creating Monsters, and it's a 250-page book, but I could nutshell it for you in 60 seconds for those of you watching, and that is, I said this: I watched guys come into prison, young Hispanics, young blacks, 18, 19 years old. Some of them were fresh, just made a mistake and were born into a mistake. And they had 2 and 3 year sentences, and they came to prison. And the minute the older guys got a hold of these guys and injected the venom and the hate that Mr. Guizar is talking about, and you have a choice. If you want to become, I can't use that kind of language on a podcast, and as a preacher, I try not to use it anyway, but I'll put it this way: you become a predator or prey. Either you're going to become somebody's boy toy, or you're going to be a gang member, and you have to do what they call put work in. And so now I got to go stab a child molester. And once I stab him, I'm going to get 10 more years in prison. It's a revolving door. It's never ending. I agree with Mr. Guizar 100%. We need to do something because prisons are not working. And 90% of the people there are not violent maniacs that we can't. If you got somebody who's cutting people's heads off, of course he needs to be in prison. If you got someone who's raping every woman or man that he sees or child, they need to be in prison. But for a lot of this stuff, these people did not make a mistake. They were born into a mistake. And what we are doing is not working. So, Joyce Gascon, I know you're watching. I support everything you're doing. And some of these old, hard-nosed DAs who just believe in lock them up and throw away the key, they need to get with the program. This is a 21st century. We need 21st century policing, 21st century trials, law and order, and so forth and so on. So, Mr. Guizar, let's hammer back down on what you were just talking about. Let's drill down on that. What would you do to a young man who's 15 years old in the position that you were in when you were 15? We know what worked for you. And look at you now. You're an attorney. What do you think we need to do with some of these gangbangers who don't really have a lot of options? They've been thrown into a gang and now they get in trouble and they're sitting in that cesspool called LA County Jail, which needs to be shut down. What can we do to try to save some of them?
Well, I studied as part of my change. I wanted to look at what is really going on with this gang culture.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I become a gang member? I wanted to understand it. I looked at the history. I've studied gangs. I'm the only attorney in California that's actually a gang expert.
Mm-hmm.
That is appointed sometimes. I am appointed sometimes by the court on criminal cases. I testify as a gang expert on big civil rights cases
Mm-hmm.
involving the deputy sheriffs who are a gang member. So I'm a gang expert,
Yes.
but I studied how it came about.
Mm-hmm.
And what we know, what I do know, is that the program that I went to, And that program at the time doesn't exist no more. It was a experimental program to
Wow.
see if it would make a difference to put kids like me, the incorrigible,
Hmm.
incorrigible. This is what the terms were that they used on me, the label I had.
Yes.
I was an incorrigible, hardcore criminal recidivist because I
Mm.
was going into jail since the time I was 12.
Mm.
Crime after crime after crime, gangs, kicking out of school, everything negative. Bam, 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 bam. So I was incorrigible. Hardcore criminal recidivist, juvenile delinquent. So this experimental program, they got me in there. 87% of the kids that went in there, 87% went on to college and changed their lives. Never
Wow.
went back to the life of crime.
Wow.
87%. And that program, back in the day, I'm sure it would have cost a lot more money then. But the funding for that program to be there for a person to be there for 6 months was like $8,000 for 6 months to live in the dorms, live in the college, have a mentor was something like $6,000.
Hmm.
But at the same time, for a prison, it was costing double that, like $20,000 to house somebody in a prison.
Yes.
So the money needs to be redirected,
Hmm.
and then all the money that's being invested in the structure that you have with the prisons and the jails needs to be restructured to send these kids to live in an environment where they could transition into a better life, like I did.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that just I know that I was very lucky that God blessed me, but
Right.
I don't think somehow I'm the chosen one. I'm
Right.
not Jesus Christ. Why did I get picked out of thousands of kids to get my life to turn around and get in the program? But I wasn't the only one. There was a good other, I think it was like a 75 juveniles that went through that program to turn their life around.
Mm.
They just didn't. Most of them didn't become lawyers. They were just happy to get out of that lifestyle, go on to college, and turn their life around. There were people from New York, from Iowa. The guy that, if I'm correct, the guy that started the Guardian Angels in New York was one of the guys that was a real hardcore criminal that came through that same type of program.
Wow.
That turned his life around, and
Wow.
he
And
turned
I'm
his life
very
around
familiar
to
with the
help
Guardian
people,
Angels. Right. I
to help
remember that.
save people,
Mm.
right? And he would not be shy away from gang members, and he would confront the gang problem, and he got on a mission. A
Hmm.
lot of us that turn their life around like that got on a mission.
Hmm.
One of my best friends who went in the same program turned his life around. He became a lieutenant in the police department.
Wow.
I won't throw his name out here,
Right.
but he flipped it, he went on that side, and me and him don't see eye to eye,
Hmm.
you know.
Right.
But I always remind him, you were one of those guys that got a chance,
Right.
and you act like everybody else doesn't deserve to have a chance.
Right.
And then he calls all the other people scumbags.
Thank
That's
you.
what people of color like myself and other African American attorneys
Hmm.
or people that become DAs, they forget that it's not that they're chosen one.
Right.
They forget these other people didn't get the same chance.
That's right.
So we need to give, like I like your mantra, give people another chance.
Yes.
And if we have an institutional process, some kind of structure that would allow for that to happen, some feasibility for that to happen, that would be great. But
Right.
how do you get people to spend their tax dollars to do that? People aren't very receptive to that.
No, they're not. Which is why they're trying to
Unfortunately,
run Gascon out of office. A personal story for you. Now, my son is 23 years old, and he's actually Hispanic and black. He looks nothing like me. I got to bring him to your office and meet you. But I was talking to him the other day about a settlement, and I had shown him a photo of your white car. But I realized that I had told him nothing about you. So I sent him an article called From Gang Member to Attorney. And my son said, wow, he looks like me. And now my son, by the grace of God, let me knock on wood, never been in jail, never been in trouble, none of that. But I was saying to him, he just couldn't believe it. He could not believe your story. And when we sat down and I started telling him how I met you and all of that, Mr. Guizar, this is my son, Jose. He had tears in his eyes. He had never seen, and it really bothered me because I talked to him a lot about minority success, black success, and all that, but he had never seen a Hispanic who looks like him, who used to be a gang member and is now a lawyer. His name is Jose, and I told him I want him to meet you. I want to say to you, I've had some of the top attorneys in this country on my podcast. I've had Tom Meseron and others, but this interview with you means so much to me, means more to me probably than any other interview I've ever done. And a part of that is because of what my son said to me the other day when he had never seen someone who looked like him, who now has a Ferrari. And of course, it's not all about material things, but just coming from where you came from and getting it the way you got it, the right way. I just think it's a blessing, and I'm fascinated by
Well,
your story.
it's funny you say that because the first thing I did when I got my Ferrari,
Hmm.
the very first thing I did, I went with a woman friend and I said, I'm going to show you where I grew up. Where are we going? And I took her down Whittier Boulevard, where I used to go cruise with the lowriders with primer spots,
Right,
bumpers falling off,
right,
broken door, cracked windshields, bullet holes.
right,
I used to cruise up and down with my homies up Whittier Boulevard. So we used to go meet girls, right?
right, right,
So I showed her, and when we pulled up by Montebello Park,
right,
there were a bunch of lowriders there,
right,
old bombs and cars. And I said, I'm going to pull in. And I pulled in my Ferrari,
right,
and I was blasting some Dre music.
right, right,
That song's still here.
right.
And I pulled in, and the respect I felt from those kids
Mm,
that were in the lowriders was just amazing. Because I
wow.
didn't act like I was above them. I didn't, because I'm not.
Right.
And I
That's right.
pulled up, and I did the nod. I didn't act like, hey,
Right. Right.
I gave the nod, the homeboy nod.
That's right.
Then I pulled up and parked, and they
Right.
were coming up, and they're like, "Hey, that's a feed in my car."
Right.
Because the Ferrari actually is a lowrider. It sits low.
Yes. Very low.
So I go, hey, look,
And look, I'm not
I'm
gonna let
still a
y'all.
lowrider.
Right.
I'm still a lowrider. I just have a different car. That's all.
Right. And I can't
Different
let you
car,
off.
but I'm still a
I can't
lowrider.
let you off the hook now. I can't let you off the hook. You promised me a ride in the
I
Ferrari,
know.
but I'm gonna update the request, and that is when we go on that ride, I got to bring my son Jose with me. I actually took him to a black pastor who actually has lowrider cars, and it was the first time he had ever been on a lowrider. I got a little video of us lowriding together in Pastor Stan's car, but now he's going to be lowriding in a Ferrari with you and me, and we got to do that. We got to do that very soon. I just am fascinated to see someone who went from where you were to where you are now. What do you think has kept you humble?
Well, a part of it is I think when I first started practicing law, I remember telling a Latino lawyer that, hey, I thought it was kind of like a badge of honor having been a gang member, and I want to let people know, right?
Right,
I came from a different. I'm not one of you, nerdy ass people, right?
right.
So I told some Latino lawyers, and they told me in a very degrading way. If I were you, I would go around telling people you were in a gang. So for like 10 years, I sheltered that.
Mm-hmm.
It was not an easy process for me in the legal profession. I was, there's only 4% of the Hispanic community that are lawyers. I mean, 4% of lawyers are Latinos. Only 4% of all lawyers
Wow,
in California.
that's
That's a
crazy.
very small minority.
Yes.
So, let alone anyone that was an ex-gang member, very few, if any. And the one dummy that I know, Isaac Guillen, unfortunately, was the guy that was the next gang member, and he got involved with some shady stuff, and he got disbarred because he couldn't keep himself clean. But
Mm-hmm.
I kept myself clean. I stood away
Right,
from the criminal element.
right,
I would not allow them to try to muscle me to do things for them. I wouldn't do stuff.
right.
And I've done over 150 jury trials,
Mm,
and that's where you get humble. And they're
right,
not easy to win. I've lost,
right,
and I was like, I wasn't just I was not the chosen one,
right.
but I never gave up,
Mm-hmm.
and I just kept fighting and fighting, and I developed the craft of handling police shooting cases, which is the main thing that I do now.
Right.
I
You've
used to
been
do
famous
anything.
for that. Yeah, you're famous for
Car
that.
accident. So now I am relentless on the police shooting cases.
Yes.
I do things that no one does when they cross-examine a cop,
Right,
and it just I raise my voice at them,
right.
and I call them out straight. I just
Well,
tell
I have
them.
seen you in action, and I can't go into details, but I saw you ask the ex-mayor, Eric Garcetti's wife, a question that I won't repeat here, but I couldn't believe your gall and your audacity and your temerity. It just fascinated me. But when I hear your story and think about you, it often reminds me of myself in some small sense. I was on the phone yesterday doing an interview with a reporter from a nationally prominent African-American newspaper, and she was asking me the same question I asked you about humility. And I was saying to her that when I came out of prison, there were pastors right here in this city of LA who shall remain nameless, who, when they found out I was in prison, they moved a couple of feet away from me. They gave me 50 feet, didn't want to deal with me, didn't want to talk with me. And a couple of conferences I tried to join didn't want me. And we have gone from that to 2 Fridays ago, one of the top conferences in California, the Baptist Ministers Conference of LA,
Awesome.
came and gave me an award, a 5-foot trophy, and on the trophy it said a champion for the homeless. And I almost lost it because I thought, and I ain't gonna call no name, but they were some of the same guys that didn't want to talk to me. But the minute they found a homeless man sleeping on their church step, I'd be the first one they call, and I'd come over there, and I was like the homeless whisperer. I mean, I remember one guy was cussing everybody out. The security thought they were going to have to shoot him because he wouldn't talk to them. And I got there, and in 3 minutes, he was in the van with me, and in 3 hours, he was housed. And he's a member of my church right now. But that's why I say what you go through gets you ready for where you're going to. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after this. Sorry to interrupt. I know you're enjoying this spectacular interview with this great man, attorney Humberto Guizar. And while I'm thinking about it, I just thought about it and decided that I'm going to try to get him. Attorney Tom Mesereau, one of the best lawyers in the world, the Clarence Darrow of our life, the white Johnny Carson, if you will, is going to be coming to Yes We Can Worship Center for a major fundraiser to help us keep the podcast going and do the great work that God has blessed us to do in this city. So he's going to be coming to Yes We Can Worship Center to do a meet and greet, because I can't count the podcasts I've done and had real estate attorneys, civil rights lawyers, and criminal lawyers, and all of them say the same thing. Man, I'd love to meet Tom Mesereau. Or some of them say, I saw him in the court but didn't really get a chance, but they want to meet Tom Mesereau. So I've gotten him to agree to come to my church and do a meet and greet for a couple of hours. And I'm going to have lawyers from all over the area. I got one guy from New York City coming in. Betty Ann Waters is going to try to join us from Maine. But God just dropped it in my spirit that I'm going to have Humberto Guizar there also, because he has gone from a gang member to a lawyer, drives a Ferrari now, and it's not all about material things. But this can impress a lot of young gang members and a lot of people who are in trouble. I'm going to bring him to my church on the same day with Tom Mesereau so that he can do the meet and greet also. And I think you all ought to be interested in coming to that fundraiser, but you got to bring some money if you're coming to it. So stay tuned to Yes We Can podcast to find out more about that. You can take a look at yeswecanworshipcenter.org and find out about that. Also take a look at PastorShermanDmanning.com. And when we're ready to have the fundraiser, hopefully sometime in February, we will announce it there also. I'm going to ask every person watching me right now, can you do me a favor today? Let this be the last time. Well, let the last podcast you watched be the last one you watched and didn't donate. Every person watching me right now, whether it's $50, $500, $5,000, $50,000, please go to yeswecanworshipcenter.org. Every lawyer watching me, every doctor, every judge, send a donation to help us house the hungry and homeless for that matter, and feed the hungry. Go to yeswecanworshipcenter.org. Some of you like to send snail mail, old school, want to write a check. It is tax deductible. I'm too excited about this show today. Send it to 10306 Avalon, Los Angeles, California. The zip code should be on the screen. I think it's 90003. I'm asking you today, please, please, please. And I know many of you are Christians. Some of you are Jewish. A lot of you are Jewish, actually. And some of you are Mormons, whatever your religion might be. And if you have no faith, that's okay too. But in my faith, Jesus said in St. Matthew chapter 25, I was hungry and you fed me not. I was in prison and you visited me not. Yes We Can Worship Center is the only church in this city that houses the homeless every day of the week, and we feed the hungry. It is our motto. It is what we do. Go to yeswecanworshipcenter.org right now. Click donate now. Send me an email and say, Pastor, I decided to help you keep the podcast going. I decided to help you feed the hungry. I decided to help you house the homeless. Now let's get back to Humberto. Take a look. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're with Yes We Can podcast with Pastor Sherman D.Manning, and my special guest today is attorney Humberto Guizar. And so we were talking about the Baptist Ministers Conference, and shout out to President K.W. Toulis, who actually knows my producer, the poetess. And shout out to you, Dr. Toulis. But as we were saying, Mr. Guizar, some of these people just need a chance. They need an opportunity. Have you done any speaking to not just Latino, but African American and other organizations, telling young people the story of your life?
Yeah, I go to colleges and I'm asked to speak at the opportunity seminars that they have. That is really a humbling experience. I remember having a young lady come up to me crying afterwards and saying she couldn't believe that somebody with what I've been through could become a lawyer. It was just amazing. She said she was motivated to go to college and be a lawyer. So, we could have that kind of influence on people. And the real sad part is the people that never have a chance, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The way the gang enhancement statute, which is what Gascon talks about,
Right.
it became so draconian. The kids that were sitting in the car
Mm-hmm.
that didn't even know a shooting was going to happen were in a drive-by, and if somebody got shot and killed by one person to pull the trigger,
Right.
every single kid in that car, if they were 15, 14, 16, it didn't matter. They all went to prison,
Wow.
and they were all charged as adults, and they all got felonies.
Right.
There's tons of kids like that in the jail system right now that
Yes.
have never even know what it's like to be with a woman, and that's
Yes.
so disheartening. I
Yes.
mean, it's just like, how do you change those people that have for decades been criminalized and dehumanized by the process? So, one of my favorite things to do is to testify as a gang expert in court on the criminal cases, and I just say, not everything a gang member does is a gang crime.
Right.
You know,
Right. Right.
it's just ridiculous what the cops say all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That every gang they commit, a carjacking is a gang crime. How could that be a gang crime? There's
Right.
nobody benefiting from a carjacking in a gang.
Right.
You know,
Miss-
but they use this language, notoriety. They gain notoriety, and it increases their status in the gang.
Mm-hmm.
You know, armed robbery, that's not a gang crime. There's so many crimes that are not gang crimes, but these kids get thrown with the gang crime. And as you know, when they're charged with a gang crime, it's double the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
If it's the first time, it's then it becomes the what do you call it, the life sentence,
Right.
if they have a prior.
Right.
3 strikes, you're out.
Right.
It's like just horrible.
Right. And all
You know,
these things
I
that
would
have
have been
been.
in prison.
Mhm.
If that law would have existed when I was a minor,
Right.
I would still be in prison to this day.
Wow.
The person you're talking to would be probably a hardcore member of the mafia. You know what I mean?
Right.
I would not be a lawyer. I would have been something else, or
And-
I'd be dead by now.
And all the good that you've been able to do to society would be gone. And that's why, again, those of you watching, and I know Attorney Dana Cole is watching. Your wife was a judge, just retired. Your daughter's a DA. Tell her to get this to Gascon. I know Tom Mesereau. I know many of you are watching. We have got to do something. So rather than trying to run Gascon out of office, why don't pastors and lawyers and thinkers get together and do for him the same thing that I think we need to do for Karen Bass? If we're going to help her deal with the homeless epidemic and the homeless epicenter of the nation, of the world, if you ask me, it's going to take a collaborative effort on behalf of all of us. So why don't we also get behind the DA and say, what can we do to save some of these lives? He just pointed out to you better than I could that there are young men in prison who are 20 and 30 years old who don't even know what it's like to be with a woman because they got locked up at 15. And these DAs go after time like a vampire going after blood. And all of that sounds good, and all of that feels good for the moment. But my question is, once you've spent 25 years in prison and it's been to be or not to be, and you've had to kill or get killed, when you get out, what are you then? You are an animal in many cases, and you're so dangerous that I don't want to be nowhere next to you. I tell people, Mr. Guizar, that when I was in prison, I met guys who should never, ever be there. Quite frankly, I met guys who should have never been there in the first place. But I also met a few guys, Mr. Guizar, that if I saw them on the streets right now, I'll dial 911 because they were frightening. So, you know, it works both ways, but the bottom line is what we have been doing for decades in this country has not worked. And I think voices like yours need to be amplified, and we need to talk about it. We need to have a summit on sentencing and what we can do to transform our communities. Since we say this is the 21st century and everybody wants to make a difference on all of these other great things. What's the largest police or the most notorious police brutality shooting case you've ever had?
Oh man, they're all to me. All of them are notorious. All of them are serious.
Tell us about one of them.
Every wrongful death case to me is a
Of
horrible.
course.
Right now, the current ones that I'm working on is really bad. The Anthony Vargas case. It's
Yes.
a high-profile case where the
Yes.
guy got shot
Mm.
10 times in the back while he was on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and 2 times in the back of the head,
Mm.
and once in the arm. Literally execution style, mafia, like Italian mafia style, where they
Who-
just shoot you and massacre you.
Who shot
Right?
him?
They found a gun under his body after they shot him, but he never aimed the gun, never had the gun in his hand,
Mhm.
no fingerprints on the gun, all kinds of negative stuff. And one of the deputies that killed him is also a defendant in another case that I have coming up for trial.
Oh, wow.
Jorge Serrano, who we have witnesses that say Jorge Serrano threw a gun and was running, and then he stopped and surrendered. And with both hands in the air like this,
Mm-hmm.
he was executed and shot to death. And these are not gang member witnesses or fly-by-night people.
Mm-hmm.
These are very credible recipient witnesses that say they saw this.
Mm.
One of my favorite cases was that I ever did a trial on was one of my biggest wins was the Cornejo case.
Mm-hmm.
Cornejo was a guy that in the Ramona Gardens got pulled over. He didn't want to go to jail because he was on parole.
Mm-hmm.
He was in organized crime, on parole, all his life in prison, 3 kids from 3 different mothers. So what happened is that he ran, 5 police officers caught him. They beat him to a pulp.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was having difficulty breathing, instead of taking him to the hospital, they let him sit in the car. And then by the time they decided to take him in, he was having difficulty still. They didn't take him to the hospital, and they took him to the jail and dragged him in, like my Uncle Bernie kind of deal. His body was already dead.
Wow.
They called him in, and then they called the paramedics.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, it was an extremely difficult case. And in that case, we won a big verdict, a real big verdict for the family.
Mm-hmm.
And I cried like a little baby because I felt vindicated, because I felt like that was me. That was that guy. And I told the jury the story,
right,
of what it's like to be in that situation where you don't want to die.
right.
I had been shot as a kid when I was in the gang, and the police officers, the LAPD, on purpose took their time to get me to the hospital. And I was telling them, please, I don't want to die. I was begging them, please. And I was crying.
Right.
And, I didn't have a witness to say that, but in the closing argument, when I did my closing argument in that case, I brought back, I talked to the third person, and I told him, ladies and gentlemen, that man was dying, and he was telling the cops, I don't want to die. And I was crying in the closing arguments with real passion. It wasn't made up. It was real. And so the jury saw that and said, yeah, he was dying, and they treated him like an animal. And I said, no human being, regardless of who they are, regardless of their background, should be punished, and the cops should never take advantage of their badge and abuse people. It doesn't matter who they are. People are all humans, okay? It's like we just won a recent verdict against the sheriff's department, or a recent settlement where a woman, they went to her house, and they had a warrant to search her house for drugs, and she said, go ahead, and they searched her house, but then they insisted on a cavity search, and she said, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, they did it anyway, and they probed under her vagina, and they cut her during the search. Wow. And nobody believed her. Nobody believed her. Old Sheriff Villanueva was the captain of the station at that time, and I was going to call him to trial, but we didn't go to trial. But we did the trial, and I was able to show to the jury that all the sheriffs that were involved lied, that it did happen. And this woman was a woman that most people would never want to represent. She had tattoos all over her neck. She had been arrested multiple times for many crimes. She had been in prison.
Now, excuse me, who did you say? You said something about Villanueva?
Yeah, well, Villanueva was the captain of the station where this happened,
wow.
Pico Rivera.
Okay. Wow.
And he acted like nothing ever happened.
Wow.
And I didn't even, at first I was like, come on, this lady, she's been busted many times for having meth. She's lost custody of her children. She's been in and out of prison. All right? For fraud, for this, for that. Right. She's a real hardcore criminal.
Right.
Right? But there was a soft side to her. And I saw the soft side of her. That she really was just a kind of a dummy that just got caught up in the gang lifestyle and got taken advantage of and abused and mistreated. And she became a criminal. Right?
Right.
But I told the jury on my closing argument that no woman, regardless of who they are, if they're black, brown, poor, from the ghetto, with tattoos, whatever, should not be treated the way my client was treated. And the fact that she was a criminal and all that bad stuff, that's why they did it to her, because they figured you people would not care about her, I told them. When they did this to her, they thought, when you go to trial and you're in front of a big jury like you guys, you're going to say she deserved what she got.
Right.
So is that what you're going to do here in this case? I told them. So they were deliberating. And once we knew we had a verdict that was going to come in our favor, the county got very scared and they didn't want to wait for the verdict. So we ended up settling it for significant money.
When was that?
That's one of my favorites as well.
When was that? Recently?
That was recently, yes.
Wow.
I did that with my young partner, Christian Contreras, who's my protege. And that kid is a hungry lawyer.
Yeah, we were trying to get him on the show. One moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back after this. I hope you're enjoying this fascinating interview with attorney Humberto Guizar. Next time I get him on, I got to get Christian Contreras, another outstanding young attorney. When you see him, you'll think he might be Humberto's personal trainer. But this young man was homeless himself. And we'll tell you the story about how he became an attorney. His name is Christian Contreras. Christian, if you're watching, drop me an email. Let me know that you enjoyed the podcast. I hope that attorney Dana Cole, I hope Tom Mesereau, I hope Betty Ann Waters, I hope all of you are watching. I hope you all will show this to Judge David Carter. If you're watching Elizabeth and Matt Umhofer, please get this to Judge David Carter. We need to get this one actually to George Gascon. This podcast needs to be in the DA's hand, and it also needs to be in the hands of Mayor Karen Bass. If you're watching the podcast, you know exactly why I am saying that. But the other thing we need to do is we got to keep it going. We got to keep the work going. So I need all of you watching who will send me these emails and tell me what a great podcast. It's very professional. I love it. Pastor, you're doing a great job. You're a natural. Who taught you how to do it? Send a donation so that we can keep doing what we're doing. And some of you have been watching me now for almost a year and you haven't sent a dime yet. This is not so that the pastor can go buy a new Rolls Royce. Not to say there's something wrong with the pastor having a Rolls Royce if they write books and got businesses and can afford to do so, as long as they're not exploiting people, then they can drive what they want to drive. But this is not for me to get a car. This is not for me to get a new suit. I got some suits. This goes to the belly of those hungry people on Skid Row and all over this city. This is the homeless epidemic. This is the homeless epicenter of the world. And Karen Bass can't do this by herself. She's going to need help. I told someone the other day, a reporter that I was speaking with, I'm not going to take a single grant from the city of LA. So that ought to be a breath of fresh air to Mayor Karen Bass, because I love preachers and I love pastors, and there are many great pastors in this city. Public disclaimer, many great. But there's also some money-hungry guys who want to get into the pocket of the mayor so they can get a grant, and they're really not trying to help homeless people. They're trying to help themselves. We'll talk about that some other time. But I don't want any money from the city. I don't want any money from the government. I want my podcast viewers. I want all of these rich lawyers, rich judges and doctors and wealthy people who are touched by this podcast to keep the podcast going and help us to do the work that we do in the trenches, in the streets, every day. My work is in the streets, not in the suites. Can I say that again? My work is in the streets, not in the suites. So those of you watching me right now, young, great lawyers like Christian, older lawyers like Attorney Cole, whoever you are, please help us today. Send a tax-deductible donation to yeswecanworshipcenter.org. And if you want to see the work that I do, check me out. Just go to my website and you'll see me feeding. You'll see me housing. My work, the proof is in the pudding. And I will keep doing the work every day because of where God brought me from. Bishop T.D. Jakes always says, it's good when God raises up somebody from the trenches, somebody from the prison, somebody from the street, somebody from Skid Row, because once we arrive, if we ever do, you ain't got to worry about us being arrogant or cocky or looking down our nose on anybody, because we know what it's like to sleep in the streets. We know what it's like to try to figure out, where am I going to use the bathroom today? We know what it's like if you can use the bathroom on the street somewhere behind a tree and not have anything to clean yourself with. I know that's TMI, but there are people going through that right now in Los Angeles and around this nation. So let me leave by saying, please go to yeswecanworshipcenter.org. Send your tax-deductible donation today. And also take a look at PastorShermanDManning.com. And I can't get out of here without telling you, if you're watching us on YouTube, like the video. If you're watching us on Spotify and any other kind of file, wherever you get your podcast, please like the video. Keep the faith. Let's get back to this interview with attorney Humberto Guizar. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm in a fascinating interview, one of the most fascinating interviews I've done with attorney Humberto Guizar. And listen, we're almost out of time. Let me say this to you. You have proven to me that you're willing to take cases that a lot of other attorneys turn down, and you're very effective at that. I remember 2 or 3 years ago when the pandemic hit, there was this Black Baptist preacher standing outside the mayor's residence, protesting for the homeless, simply asking the mayor to use his power to take care of the homeless during the COVID-19 emergency. And the mayor tried to basically bribe him, if you ask me, by sending out his chief of staff to say, the mayor wants to meet with you, Pastor. And the pastor said to them, the only way I'm going to meet with you is if the homeless people can meet with him also. And they turned him down. The next day, they arrested this guy and charged him with felony stalking. Of course, the DA didn't pick the case up, and the preacher looked all over the city trying to find an attorney to file a lawsuit against them. Couldn't find anybody. Came to you. You took the case. And I know we really can't talk about it, but I have heard that that case is almost over. And that person was me. So why did you take the case?
I handled a First Amendment case up to the U.S. Supreme Court,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the First Amendment is the most powerful constitutional right we have.
Mm-hmm.
And you being a person of color who had been in prison,
Mm-hmm.
who had been through the same experience like I had,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I heard that you had not been able to find an attorney, and everybody was, pushing it aside,
Right.
it's like that's what always happens. I'm the one that ends up being the fall guy, and I knew it wasn't going to be an easy case, and as you know,
Right.
it was very difficult
Yes.
for the constitutional issues involved. We could have got hosed by the judge.
Right.
And hopefully we did the right thing before the judge could act.
Right.
Screw us.
Right.
We came to a resolution which I think is reasonably fair.
Yes.
It could have been, if we would have went to trial and had a jury verdict, it's, we never know. We could have lost, we could have won.
Right.
We'll never know. But
Right.
I think we did the right thing, and it was an honor.
Right.
Truly an honor to represent you, Pastor.
Right.
To represent you and get to know you. And I do wish I could have done more, but I did the best I could under the circumstances.
Right. Right. Well, I find myself very satisfied and I'm gratified that you all took the case and that you and Christian did what I think was a remarkable job, because it was an uphill battle. And anytime you're trying to sue these kinds of people, and when you have some baggage of your own, whether it is deserved or undeserved, you have to do the right thing. So I know that we did the right thing, and I know one of these days we'll be able to talk about it. And the next time I have you, I'm going to have Christian on also, your young protege, because he has a fascinating story also. This is another Hispanic who was homeless, and now he is a very reputable attorney. And let me say this, coming up very soon, I'm going to have attorney Tom Mesereau is coming to my church, and we're going to be doing a fundraiser for Yes We Can Worship Center. He's going to do a meet and greet, because I've had many lawyers who say that they want to meet Tom, and I'm bringing attorney Betty Ann Waters from the state of Maine. She is a woman who had a GED. Her brother went to prison for something he didn't do. She went to law school, got a law degree, got him out, and then sued and won about $20 million. She's coming also, and I will not do the event unless I can have you to come also. I want you to please come. I don't have the date yet, but we're going to work it out, and I want people to meet you and hear something about your story and the fascinating story that you've had and the amazing journey that you've had from a gang member to a lawyer. We're almost out of time. Is there anything you'd like to say, last words, Mr. Guizar, before we go?
No, just thank you for allowing me to be a guest here on your program. It's always nice to talk to people that are willing to listen to the other side of negativity that people shut down.
Mm-hmm.
They shut down the truth.
Right.
The horrible incarceration is, they shut it down and they don't listen. But you provide the public with the opportunity to show through another window,
right,
what's really going on, and nobody could dispute my background. Nobody could say I'm not telling the truth.
right.
Nobody could claim that what I've done and how I do it is untrue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very humbled and honored that you allow me to be on your program as a guest. Thank you very much, Pastor.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to attorney Humberto Guizar. Next time you see him, we're going to have Christian Contreras with us. I want you to know, those of you who are watching today, that we have to do something about this criminal justice system in this country, and we can make a difference. We can turn this country, Dr. King said, right side up, because it's already been turned upside down. I know that we got a lot of Republicans and far-right people who claim to be law and order, but a lot of them are not law and order. They're just law and order when it comes to rich folks. I've often said that the rich get richer and the poor get prison. Listen, I hope we've done something today that might change your paradigm and get you to decide that we can turn this world right side up. And we can do it together, ladies and gentlemen. We can do it together. Yes, we can.
I know we can make it work. I know we can make it if we try. Great gosh almighty. We can make it, y'all.